This is a problem that the public needs to understand, that there will be bail-ins and runs on the bank. The institutions, the banks already know this. They can't be bailed out anymore by us taxpayers. Instead, they get bailed in by the depositors of the bank, who are now considered unsecured creditors. Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, I believe is what it stands for. It's the organization that backs all the deposits held at the banks in the United States, to which there's over $9 trillion in deposits being backed by a few $100 billion in assets or in cash by the FDIC. In essence, it's a scam. And they don't have enough money to back the deposits. And people need to understand this. And thanks to the leverage that has been created, this will make the Great Depression look like a walk in the park when these banks fail, because they are also leveraged. They have removed all the reserve requirements ever since the pandemic. And so when you deposit money in the bank, they don't hold it. Heck, right now, they would take your deposit. If you know this, even though interest rates have gone up, what you get in the banks is still a fraction of a percent.
Right. So, Andy, what FDIC is concerned about is a run on the bank. In other words, you and me and everybody else runs in there and say, we want our money back, but there's no money there.
That's right. In fact, if you give them $100,000, they're not going to leave that in there. They'll go buy, 3-month treasuries earning 4% instead of leaving it in the bank as a reserve. They were allowed to relinquish all reserve requirements during the pandemic. And so this has created a problem. The FDIC Systemic Resolution Advisory Committee had a meeting that leaked out to YouTube. And the meeting, they basically said, listen, the members of this committee who realize that the public has more faith in the credit of the banking system than we do here in this committee, this is a problem that the public needs to understand, that there will be bail-ins and runs on the bank. The institutions, the banks already know this.
Can you explain what a bail-in is?
So in 2008, when the banks went upside down based upon the poor decisions that they made, the public, the taxpayers, bailed out the banks. The money that was given to them by the government is funded by the taxpayer. That's been made illegal. So they can't be bailed out anymore by us taxpayers. Instead, they get bailed in by the depositors of the bank, who are now considered unsecured creditors. Meaning, just like they did in Cyprus. In Cyprus, anyone who had over $100,000, that money over $100,000 was given into the bank, like in bankruptcy protection, where the money was used to make the bank whole, and any money left over would be given back out to the depositors, for shares of a defunct bank given back out to the depositors in a pro fashion. In other words,
I want to explain that. Okay, if you have savings in, let's say, Bank of America, and it requires a bail-in, they're going to keep your money and give you these fake assets called shares in Bank of America.
Yes.
In other words, you get hosed. I think there's nothing more important than your education right now, your financial education that's real. So we have this thing. What happened at that FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, that got leaked? They said, ladies and gentlemen, I think there's going to be a run on our banks. In other words, they're going to yank our money out. And that means all you savers out there, you good little boys and girls, you will become owners of the bank. They're going to give you stocks instead of your cash. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly right. And they say not only do the institutions know this is coming, that the people need to understand that bailouts are gone and bail-ins are now the order of the day. But they were very succinct in saying, the problem is, if we tell the public this, the unintended consequences will incite a run to the banks. And this is a very scary deal. In fact, when I saw it, I really was, for the first time, in terms of what we believe to be true, I was very, very, very concerned about my own personal money in the bank, to the point where I've been buying gold and silver every 2 weeks for 34 years. I'm ready to go buy a whole lot more, just because I don't want money in the banks, because they're telling us it's coming and the banks know it and the people need to know it, but we really don't want to let them know it, because there will be unintended consequences. It will only incite and expedite this run on the banks, which they deem as inevitable. But let's just allow me, if you will, a moment to rant about, I talk a lot about what's happening around the world and globally as it pertains to the coalition of countries joining together against the West. But if you were looking at the West from across the pond, what do you see? You see a country that they just admitted that Social Security is $75.9 trillion underfunded. IOUs, $75.9 trillion. A trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. And that's not counted against a $31 trillion debt. So you're already over 100 trillion there. You got Medicare, Medicaid, and government military pensions, which push us to over $130 trillion. Robert and Kim, do you know what they tell us is their largest single asset, which represents 38.4% of federal assets? Do either of you know what the largest asset is in the United States?
Maybe.
Kim.
Student loans?
There you go. Most people don't get that. It's a liability against the children in this country, yet they consider it an asset. We are a country, the land of the free, the home of the brave, the world reserve currency, and our biggest asset is death on our children. The U.S. is depleting and destroying the very resources that has made it so powerful in the first place. Freedom, capitalism, reputation, military strength, and go on and on and on. But it's unbelievable the things that are happening. A country where $5 billion to build a border wall to stop fentanyl from coming in and poisoning our children, which is the last I heard, the greatest cause of death amongst teenagers right now in this country is fentanyl poisoning. But $114 billion to the Ukraine is okay. Giving pensions to the Ukrainian government, where we pay $740 billion in interest on the debt last year. We have to borrow money to pay interest on the debt to which we borrowed in the first place. It's absolutely, completely, and totally upside down what's happening in this country. And when you look at the FDIC saying there's going to be run the bank, well, it's becoming very obvious. We're destroying the value of the dollar, and the world around us understands this. We are borrowing money that we don't have. We're spending it in ways that are just absolutely, completely, totally upside down, while our cities and the crumbling infrastructure around us is making us wonder who's going to come and rescue the bridges and the railways and the roads and the infrastructure in this country that is so in need of repair. And yet instead we borrow money to fight a war that is enriching the military industrial complex, but impoverishing this country. And at the same time, the people around the world understand exactly what we are doing. We are inflating away the dollar, and we are bullying the rest of the world by weaponizing the dollar and saying, if you don't do this, well, you're kicked out of the game. And I think this is why you are seeing what will amount to north of 80% of human population when you put it all together, the 60 plus countries that are already on the docket to join BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Belt Road Initiative, the Eurasian Economic Union. These entities are coalescing, and they are using commodities like gold, the tier one reserve asset, as deemed by the Bank of International Settlements in 2019.
Would you explain that, Andy? What about tier one? Because that was important.
So at the end of World War II, the dollar was anointed the only tier one reserve asset in the world. They said that the dollar, at least as far as central banks are concerned, is a riskless asset. It is tier one. And that's been the only tier one asset, that and U.S. treasuries, since the end of World War II. It would be used for collateral. If the Bank of England is trading with the Swiss National Bank, they wouldn't have used pounds or francs as collateral. They would use dollars or treasuries. Now they're telling us that gold is the only other tier one asset. But they don't really tell us this. You have to dig and dig and dig to find it. You can Google it, it'll pop right up like that. Maybe this will explain why many of the countries that are applying to BRICS have massive percentages of their reserve assets in gold, like north of 30%, every single one of them, just about. And why
one second.
are accumulating it.
What Andy is saying is, before the last few years, they held U.S. bonds, treasuries.
Yes.
And now they're saying, we made a mistake. We better get out of these bonds and into gold and hard assets.
That's exactly right.
Right.
That's exactly right. And it's other OPEC producing countries too, and other countries that are moving away from the dollar. The Iraqi central bank, a country we just spent $1 trillion in, right? To help the Iraqis, if that's what you really want to believe. And they plan to allow trade from China to be settled in yuan instead of US dollars. That is the beginning of the end of dollar trading in Iraq. You saw the same thing in Iran, where their leader was the first Iranian president in 20 years to visit China. They are all moving away from the West. And you can see this. It's the rallying cry of the hypocrisy and the bullying by the West that gets everyone to the table. But it will be a commodity-backed system. We've already been told that they will use commodities to back a new reserve currency. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization has told us they want to issue a gold-backed settlement currency for the entire Eurasian continent. These are all the same players. And basically what they're saying is that the only way that you give authenticity and validity to a system is to peg it to something that can't be inflated away. As all governments have done, going all the way back to Roman times, they have chosen inflation over austerity. And I think they are now really realizing this. And what better way to use distributed ledger technology to roll out a central bank digital currency than to show the veracity of the whole system by what is being pledged to it by all the member countries. It's not going to be like the European Union, which was a great novel idea, but it didn't work because all the different cultures are moving in different directions, just like it would be with the BRICS. You know, you got, on one hand, you got Iraq and Iran both applying at the same time. You got Iran and Saudi Arabia. These countries don't like each other, but what? My enemy's enemy is my friend. Well, what if we all pledge commodities so we all get equal say at the table, equal footing? The BRICS nations, they rotate their presidency. They are a system that will be based upon cooperation, mutual benefit, and a pledging or pegging of commodities, I believe, to a distributed ledger technology to show the world, hey, here it is.
It's distributed ledger. Is that blockchain?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And so they will use blockchain to show what each country has pledged or pegged to the new system to give it veracity. And I think that's really where the tide will change. People I respect, like Rick Rule, a good friend of mine, said, well, it's hard when you look at the European Union as an example. It didn't work because they were pulling in different directions. I agree. But if you if underneath the whole system, you have commodities that each country pledges to the system, it will make it work. It will be the glue that holds it all together, I believe. And the rallying cries against the West, the destruction and the brain-dead monetary policy of the West and the mismanagement of the reserve currency and the weaponizing of it is what's making every country run to the table. But the pledging of commodities, the only other tier one reserve asset in the world next to US dollars in particular, is exactly what they will use to pledge to make the system legitimate. And, you know, people say to me, well, why isn't gold going up if they bought more gold than at any time in the last 55 years? I asked my head trader, because we hedge our exposure to gold, meaning we use COMEX contracts to take the other side of the gold and silver that I have in my warehouse. In other words, if this is 1,000 ounces of gold in my warehouse, and this is 1,000 ounces on paper on COMEX, if I'm holding it here long in my warehouse, I'll sell it short on COMEX. Because if the price of what I'm holding in my warehouse goes down, it goes up commensurate on what I have on COMEX, and vice versa. So my holdings for my business are market neutral. So I asked him, how much money does it take to control a COMEX contract, which is roughly $185,000 worth of gold? It's 100 ounces. He said, all we need to have in our margin account is $7,000. So if I'm a commercial bank or a central bank, with $1 billion in my margin account. Do you see the perception of reality that I can create? I can suppress the hell out of the price of gold and then scoop it up when no one's looking, because
Correct.
everyone is so focused on the price. It allows the most sophisticated money in the world, the money that's closest to the information. Forget about the size of their wealth. It's bigger than all of our wealth combined, but they're closest to the information and they know what's coming. So they suppress the paper markets and drain the COMEX and the LBMA and all of the ETFs that are being drained by these entities of their physical metal. To the point, like in silver right now on COMEX, there's only 288 million ounces in the entire COMEX universe right now in silver, of which only 31 million of those ounces are backing the bars that are available for delivery. India imported 304 million ounces last year. They are using commodities as the way to de-dollarize, and they are using the Western suppression of these commodities, because what is gold and silver? Everything over the last few years has blown sky high in value, thanks to low interest rates and more money created in the last 4 years than in the history of the country preceding it.
Right.
So
right.
what are they doing? Everything gets blown up, but why not gold and silver? Because it is the canary in the mine shaft.
Right.
It exposes the frailty of the system.
Correct.
And our adversaries, even if they are to our face friendly, are using this suppression on the Western markets to drain the system. They are using it against us. It's
Right.
the ninjutsu move. They are using our leverage against us. And that's exactly what they're doing, allowing them to de-dollarize under the cover of price suppression.